Power BI desktop. Now before I start my discussion on the topics today, as I promised you in my last session last week that I'll be talking about some new concepts in Power Query Editor on every session of Power BI. And after that, I'll continue my discussion on the DAX concept. So today's topic is for Power Query Editor is the column by examples and conditional column. Now these two features are very important features in Power Query Editor. Now if I click on this particular transform data under the home menu, under the add column, so we have options like column from examples and conditional column. Now let's see what these two particular options under this particular under the Power Query Editor help us to in order to transform the data. So before I continue my discussion on the data modeling part, I'll be talking about the Power Query Editor on some topics like the column from examples and the conditional columns. So for this, let me close this particular screen and let me connect to a sample data. So the first topic that I'm going to talk about Power Query Editor is column from examples. So I'll click on this Excel data connector and I'll select a sample data. Now these are all random data that I'm creating. Guys, there's one important thing that I want to highlight over here in today's sessions. So the data sample data that I'm using, those are all random data that I create for you. You can easily create this data on your own because this data doesn't contain any technicality or any kind of functions or formulas that you need to use. So you can just follow, you can just see the data structure that I'm using over here and you can just easily create your own data sets. Now for this particular session I'm going to use the three data is the split, basic, and let me select the alphanumeric and let me click on transform data. I repeat, I'm talking about Power Query Editor first and then I will move in and continue my discussion on the data modeling part on where I left last, where I created a model for you. So under Power Query Editor I'm talking about the topic is column from examples and after that I will talk about conditional column. Now column from example is an option in under add column in Power Query Editor which helps you to create a new column by editing or selecting the existing column. It can be in terms of all the columns in a data set or in terms of a particular column in your data set. So I'll be showing you three types of approach where we will be working with a new column. We'll be adding a new column to the existing data by using the column from examples under add column option. Now if you are following my cursor over here, I have connected to a data which contains three tables. Now all the data in the tables are of different format. The first table that I'm going to select is a basic table. Now under this table you can see their name of some certain persons and the column headers are not updated. So let me transform this data. So I'll go to the home menu and I click the use first row as header and then I'll click on the add column and I will select the column from example. Now if I click on this particular downward arrow over here, we can see there are two options under column from examples. The first from all columns and from selection. So I will select the column and I'll click on this and you can see there's a new column that has been a blank column that has been created in the right hand side of your screen. Now this is where we'll do the transformation. The requirement is I want to create a new column. I want to add that particular column to this existing column which should contains the initial of the first name and the last name. Means for Bonnie Potter I want B Potter as a new column. So what I can do, I can select the first row and I'll write B Potter. For Ronnie Proctor, I can go for R Proctor. And the third one, if I write, I can see D1. And you can see for the other names, automatically the first initial and the last name has been created. I don't have to supply the, I didn't write the other names over here. So for Marcus Dunlop, we have M Dunlop. For Lenny Houston, they have already taken a name called LNEHU Houston, Me Garner, and Lil. So this is an example of column from example which we can use to create a new column, and we can edit the first column and can get a new column, and I can add that particular column to the existing column. Now if I click on OK, you can see the new column has been added, and you can name this column. You can do a right click on this particular column name and you can name this column as short name. Now the important thing that I want to highlight behind this particular example is, if we click on this add column option, there is a setting icon over here. If I click on the setting icon, there's a column, custom column pop-up will come where you can see a piece of code associated with this. Now this is called the M code. Now M code is a code that is generated by the Power Query editor whenever you perform any data transformation steps on the existing data. Now I'll be showing one more example of an M code in the upcoming discussions in today's session, where I'll be using this kind of codes to create a table in our data. So what I wanted to say is, whenever you do any kind of operations on the table, there is a code that is generated, and this code is called a M code in Power BI. Now let's move to the next example. The next example that I'm going to use, where I'll be using the column from example, is on this particular table, that is split table. Now in this table you can see there is an existing names of people. I want to use this particular option column from examples to create a new column where I want that particular column to be updated with the names where there is a space between the first name and the last name. So you can see there is no space over here on the names available over here. So what I can do, I click on the custom from example column, and you can see there's again a new column, a blank column has been created. Now before that, what I want, let me do a bit of transformation. You can see the column header name is available in the record section. So what I can do, I can go to the home, under the transform section, I can use this particular name, and let me name this column headers, and then I can go to add column, click on column from examples, and let me write the first name as Bonnie space Potter. The second name also same, Bonnie space Potter. And you can see the other names has been also been populated with the same space between them. You can see there's not a space over here. So what you can do, you can again write the name over here and press enter. You can see the other names has been populated with a space between them. So this is how we can use, this is one more implementation of column by examples, where we can use this particular option to edit an existing column in your data set, and you can create a new column. Now it's your choice. You can remove this column after you've done the transformation, and you can work along, and you can proceed forward with the existing column that we have. The next example that I'm going to use, where I'll be using the column from example, is the alphanumeric column. Now this column contains certain numeric value. Now sometimes what happens, this option doesn't work. In that case, what you can do, you can use the split column option, which is available under the transform, where you can use the digit to non-digit option to split this column. However, for this example, I'll be using the add column, and under the add column, I'll be using the column from example. So before that, let me update the column headers. So I'll go to the home menu, use the first row as header option, and I'll again come back to the add column option over here, and I'll select the column from example, and let me write the first name as Uttar Pradesh space 7. The next one I can go for Gujarat space 9. Now you can see the other value has been populated, but this is coming a null value. Now this is what I want to focus. Sometimes this option doesn't work. In that case, you can go to the transform and you can use the split column option by digit to non-digit option. So let us see if I can do that. So it's also not working. So this particular data has certain issue. So in that case, you have to again go back to the data set and you have to check whether this particular data is a authentic data or not. Fine. So the idea behind this particular example was to show you how we can use the column by examples too in a various scenarios of splitting a column, transforming a name from a full name to a short name kind of options. Now this was all about the custom column by example options you can use. I would request you guys to please explore this option. This is a very interesting option we have in Power Query Editor. The next example that I'm going to talk about is an option is a conditional column. Now for this, we'll go back to our existing project that we have started last week. So let me close this particular section. And let's start working on our project that we started last week. Now this is our data. This particular data set we are working where we have certain cells, certain fact and certain dimension tables. So we were working on this particular data set. So we were working on this particular data set where we were working on the tables like fact and dimension tables. So I discussed about what are fact tables. Fact tables are those tables on which we can perform mathematical operations, and dimension tables are those tables on which we cannot perform mathematical operations. We also have discussed about I've also given a brief walkthrough about how we can work with DAX functions where we have created this date table. So if I click on this particular date table, so we have used a DAX function called calendar where we have created a date table, and then we also discussed about how we can establish a connection between the fact table and dimension table. Now today we'll continue our discussion on this particular date table, but before that let me show you what is a conditional column. Now for that I'll again click on transform data and I'll go to the Power Query Editor. Now in Power Query Editor, in order to have a proper understanding of the conditional column which is available under the add column option, what we can do, we can select this region table. Now I'll be using this particular option conditional column to create a new column because conditional column is present under the menu called add column. So any operation that you perform under add column will add a new column to your data. That's for sure. That is understood and that is self-explanatory. Add column menu itself means that it will add a physical column to your data set. Now under this particular menu, I'll be using the conditional column option, and the requirement is I want to create a group where I'll be listing certain countries under local countries, certain country a country under the global country, and the other rest of the countries I want to categorize them under the others group. I repeat, for example, the requirement is under the country column, from the country column, I want to mark Germany as a global country and Spain as a local country, and other countries apart from these two will be listed under the others option. And for this, I'll be using the conditional column option from the Power Query Editor. So I'll go and I'll click on conditional column option, and the moment I click on conditional column option, there will be a pop-up option coming up where there are certain values that we have to input over here, like the new column name and the rules that I want to run on this new column. So let me name this new column first as category, or I can say group. And the first column I will select as a country because I want to use that particular column to create the group. Now there are certain options, logical operators that are logical conditions that are there, like equals to, does not equals to. So I will select an equal, and the first country that I want to name is Germany, and I want the output to be as global. So I want to mark Germany as a global country. Now let me add the second clause. Second clause was I want to mark Spain as a local country. So I will click on add clause. I will select the column from here, and I will select the operator. I will keep the operator as equal, and over here the value space, let me give the name as Spain, and I will name it as a local country. And the rest of the countries will be marked as others. Now if I click on OK, there is a new column that has been added with a column header name as country group, and you can see the Germany has been marked as global, the Spain is marked as local, and the other wherever there is Spain we can see there's a local, and the rest of the countries has been marked as others. So we have taken a condition, we have actually allocated a condition to the country column where under that particular condition two countries has been marked as a different group and the rest of the countries has been marked under the different category of groups. So this is how we can use a conditional column to create groups or to create category in our data on the basis of certain conditions, or it's a kind of a filter you can say by which we are categorizing the data without removing the unwanted data as we do in filters, but placing them under a condition and creating a new column and adding that column to the existing data set. So this is how we can use a conditional column in Power Query Editor, and we can transform some of the columns by adding certain new information to the existing data. Now let's go back and let's continue our discussion with the data modeling part. So what I can do, I can go to this home menu and I can click close and apply. And the new column that I have added as a part of a country group has been added to the data model. Now coming back to the discussion where we left last class. So this was the topics that I want to talk about in terms of the Power Query Editor. In tomorrow's session, I will again come up with some new topics on the Power Query Editor and we'll continue our discussion on the DAX part. Now last class we created this particular module. Now what I want to add some more information to this particular model in one of the table in this particular module, and that particular table is a date table. Now going back to the data view, we have this particular date table with us which contains the date range, which we created a table where we have defined the date range from 2019 to 2020. Now let's create some more information. Let's add some more information to this existing table. Now we'll be working on some more DAX concepts today. Now talking about adding more information to this existing date table, what we can do? We have a date column with us. Now I want to add a month number column to this existing table. So how we can do that? I repeat, I want to add a column which should contains the month number. Now when I talk about month number, means the month number for Jan will be 1, for Feb it will be 2, and that will be a new column which will be added to this. So for this, what I want, I can go to this calculation part, and I can select this new column. Now the moment I select this column, you can see there's a tooltip coming up that write a DAX expression that creates a new column in the selected table and calculates the value for each row. The selected table over here is a date table. So I click on new column, and there will be a blank column that will be created. Now we can name this column as month number. And I'll be using a DAX formula called month. So this particular month function will return the number 1 for January to 12 to December, representing the month. So it will return a number as an output. So I'll select this particular month, and this particular month takes the date as the first argument, and date is the column over here, which is the default column for this particular date table. So we'll mention this particular date column. Now we'll write date, and you can see the highlighted item that I'm selected from the drop down is the date column followed by the table name. So first we have the table name, which is date, and the name of the column is also date, which is between delimiters, and the delimiters over here are the square bracket. So I'll select this particular item, I'll close the bracket, and I'll press enter. Now you can see I have extracted the month number from each of the date items over here. Similarly, now I will calculate the next formula as the month name. So we have certain numbers over here. What we want a text value, and that value should be the month name. And the requirement is that I want the first 3 digit, the first 3 alphabet for each of the month name. So I'll again go to the table tools, and again I will select the new column option, and this time I will name this particular column as month name. And I'll be using a formula called format, which converts a value to text in the specified number format. Any value which is specified in a number format converts that into a text. Now I'll select this particular formula, and this takes 2 arguments. First, the column. Second, the format in which you want. So I will first refer the column name. So I will write over here date, and the same format where the table name followed by the column name within delimiters is there, comma, and the second argument is format. So the format over here will be the first 3 characters of the month. So we'll specify the format as, this is the way we specify the format, as capital M 3 times, which means that this particular format will extract the month name in this particular format, which will contain the first 3 alphabet of the month name, and we'll close the bracket and we'll press enter. And you can see that from this date column, by using the format function, I have extracted the name of the month, which contains the first 3 characters of that particular month. Looks interesting, right? This is the fun of working with a DAX function. You can do anything. You can add any level of flexibility and any level of interactivity to your data. Now, the next formula that I'm going to work. See, I'm actually working on all the date components, all the time components with this particular date table. So let me similarly, we'll also find out the weekday. So weekday is a kind of formula in DAX that is used for calculating the week number. Same way that way we have calculated month number. So we'll go and we'll select the table tool option, and we'll click on new column, and this particular name of the column is week number. And we'll use a formula, we'll use a function name called weekdays. So there's a weekday function over here which returns the number 1 to 7 just like the month number. We'll use this formula to extract the number of week from this date column. Now what I can do, I'll select this particular formula, I'll specify the date column, first argument. Second is the return type. Now there is an interesting thing that we need to understand over here. In the return type, we can see there are three numerical values. The first is 1, which means Sunday will be the first day of the week. The second is 2, means it will take Monday as the first day of the week. And the third is 3, which will assign Monday as the first day of the week with a 0 integer, means the day will start with a numerical value of the week will start with 0 instead of 1. So let's go for the second option, and we close the bracket and we press enter, and you can see that for each of the week there is a number. For each day of the week there is a number associated. For this 2 means Tuesday, Wednesday is 3, Thursday 4, Friday 5th, Saturday 6th, Sunday 7th, and Monday is 1, because we have selected 1 as Monday as the first day of the week. Similarly, I'll again go back and click on new column, and let's get the week number. Now let me give the week name as a function name, and I'll be use the format option again. I'll provide that column name, and I'll be providing the weekday name in capital D 3 times, where first 3 alphabet of the day name will be, days of the week name will be extracted. If I press enter now, you can see for second it's Tuesday, for third it's Wednesday, for fourth it's Thursday. The way we have allocated the week number, the same way the week name has been allocated over here. So let me change this name. Now the question is, why we have created 2 columns over here, month number and week number? Because these columns will be used to sort the month name and the week name. Now why we need to sort the month name and the week name? Coming to the month name. Now if you don't sort this particular name in terms of month number, what will happen in a report, when we'll be using these columns, the month will be starting will start from in an alphabetic order, means starting from April, and then it will go to the next month, and then it will go to the next month in the alphabet order, which is not which we don't do generally. The month generally starts with January. So in that case, in order to sort that particular column so that it in the report, any report where we use the month, the starting month should be January, we have to sort this particular column. So what you can do, you can select this particular column, and you have to go to column tool option over here, and under this particular menu we have an option called sort by columns. Remember, I have selected this particular month name column, selected this column tool option. Under the sort option you have to select the sort by column, and you have to select the month number. Guys, you can try it without sorting in your report. You can see that the month will automatically start from in alphabetic order, which is not a good way, which is not the way a month should be listed. It should always start from Jan. Now similarly I will sort this particular week name number. I'll select this particular column, go to column tools, select sort by column option, and this time I'll select week number. Now these two columns have been sorted. So the work of the week number and the month number column is done. Now if I go to the model, whatever columns we have updated, you can see those columns over here in this particular table schema. Now that we have used the month number and the week number column to sort this, we have an option to either to keep this column in our data model, or what we can do, we can remove this column from the data model, because these two column doesn't have any work now. I have created these columns to sort the month name and the week name. So let me go back to the data model. Either I can right click over here and I can remove the column. I can use the delete option from the data viewpoint, or what I can do, I can go to the model view and I can select the month number. I can do a right click over here and I have an option to delete it from the model or hide it in the report view. So let me use the delete from the model. So it will delete that particular column, and the deletion of this particular column will never affect the other aspect of your report or the table. You be least assured about that. So because we have already done the sorting using that particular column, so keeping a column which is of no use may sometimes affect the report performance. Now in this case, it might be a small amount of data I'm using, but just imagine if you're using a millions rows of data where you're using a column which is not being used by the data model, can actually affect the report performance. Now similarly, I'll go and I'll remove the week number. So this time let me hide it from the report view instead of deleting. So you can see when I select the hide from the report view, there is an icon has been assigned to this particular column with a cross mark. Now if I come to the report view, you can see that week number and month number column is not there in the date table. Now this is one way. So how many ways we have learned to create a date table? First, in my last session I discussed how we can use a date column in Power Query editor, and we have extracted certain date components from that particular date column. And today we have seen how we have created a simple date table using the calendar function, and then we have further added some more information to the table. So there are two ways that I have taught you. Now let's learn the third way. Now the third way of creating a date table is a bit tricky by using certain codes and functions. Now in Power Query editor we use the concept of M function to write code. Now what I will do, I will create a date table using an M function, but I will not write a code because this code is already there with me. I'll just show you that particular code, and I will show you how we can use that particular code to create that table over there. Now this is the code that I will be going to use. This is the M code that I am going to use for creating a date table using the Power Query editor. So what I can do for this, I can go to my home section and I click on transform data, and in the Power Query editor I'll be using this advanced editor option to write this particular code, where I'll be copying this and pasting this particular code over here, and we'll use this particular advanced editor to create a date table, a dynamic date table. The earlier table that I have created using a DAX, that is a static date table where I have defined the date range, and that is done. Now how to create a date table using an advanced editor? The first thing that I am going to do over here is to go to my new source and I'll select a blank query. Now you can see there is a blank query I've selected, and there's a query, blank query over here. So let me name this particular query as date table schema. So this is a name that I have given to this particular query. Under this query, I'll open a advanced editor. Now advanced editor is a screen where we use the encode concept to write, to create certain tables and to do certain kind of data transformation work. So over here I'll be using a code to create a table using the advanced editor, which I have opened under the query called date table schema. Now I'll copy this particular code and I'll paste this code over here. Now this code has two sections. Now these are very simple code. You can easily read the code. You can see that we have used an insert option to create columns over here first. Now there are two sections in this particular code. The first is declare the function and second is calling that function. So we have declared a function called date table, function date table, which contains these are the parameters. And then I have called this particular function at the end. So what I can do, I can use this particular code. This is a standard code that I use for creating a date table. Now what I can do, I can click on, you can see the moment I paste this particular code over here, I have got a message that there is no syntax error over here. Now if I click on done, there will be a input form that is created over here, which is named as an enter parameter. Now what I can do, I can define the date range over here. So let me define the date range as first 2018 start date, and the end date may be defined as 31st/12/2020. And let me name the financial year start month as 4 because we follow January April as a financial year start month. And I'll click on invoke. Now you can see the moment I click on invoke, there is a date table that has been created. A full-fledged date table which contains all the columns that were there in the code. Let me name this particular table as D date. D for dimension, because I will be using this particular table as a reference table. I will not be doing any kind of calculations on this particular table. So I have marked this table as a D date, means dimension date table. And now what I can do, now that I have created the date table over here, let me click on close and apply, and let me bring this table to the data model part view. Now if I click on this particular data model, you can see the dimension date table is over here. Now what I can do, instead of this table, I can use this table now. So first I have to establish a connection so that I can use the data available in this table while doing a calculation with a fact table over here, that is the sales table. So let me arrange this particular date table over here. So I'll just resize this particular table like the other dimension table that I have in the model. And what I can do, I can select this date and I can bring and release this particular date over the order date. And you can see there's a one-to-many connection has been established. And what I can do, I can delete this particular connection. and I can remove this particular date table which I have created using a formula. So I can just click on this particular, the three dots that is available in the right hand side top corner of the table, and I can select delete from the model. And now I can arrange this particular table over here. So we have a full-fledged data model ready. Before we start working on the DAX part in a full-fledged, so we have arranged the fact table. We have seen the different ways of creating a date table by using a DAX formula, by using an advanced editor, and by using a Power Query editor, where we have created a date table from an existing date column. So now you know three ways to create a date table. Now date is a very important component in your reporting. It's any component which actually handles the time intelligence part in your reporting is a very important component. Now that we have created this particular model, let's start working with the DAX concept. So for that, let me go to the data view, and over here we can select the fact table, because on fact table only we'll be working on the DAX concept. We cannot use the DAX formula on the dimension tables, because most of the calculations will be taken care in the fact table. So let's find certain important information by using the DAX concept. Under the DAX discussion, I'll be working with 15 to 20 formulas as a part of this particular project execution. Under the DAX discussion, I'll be also talking about the best practices about working with a DAX formula. The different types of DAX formula, there are more than 1200 DAX formulas available over in Power BI. So it's not possible to cover all the 1200. Every month or very oftenly there are certain new DAX formula that is added to the DAX family. The learning curve of DAX concept that I will follow will be, first point will be the best way of creating DAX formula, the best practices that you should follow while creating a DAX formula in your table, the best practices in terms of arranging the DAX formula in your data model. I will also talk about I will also compare a DAX formula with a new formula and the old formula. I will show you the difference between what happens when you use a DAX formula which is a old DAX formula, and that same formula I will be creating by using a new DAX formula, and I will show you the difference. I will also show you how you can refer a DAX formula from one function to another function. So there are a lot of things that we are going to learn under the DAX concept. I will also talk about how we can create a major table by using DAX formula, and what is the importance of creating a major table. I will talk about creating a DAX major, that is a calculated major. You have already seen how I worked with calculated column. I will talk about quick measures. I will also talk about calculated new table. So new measures, quick measures, and new table along with new column. You have already seen how we can use a new column by writing a DAX function, and other three will also I'll be discussing under this particular discussion. Fine. So with that note, let's start our in-depth discussion on DAX. The first formula that I'm going to create in the sales table is to find the total sales. Now you have a data. We'll follow the Kritz DM model, the model that I've discussed as how we can use that particular model to execute any BI project. So we have understood the project first and business. This particular data is all about an import-export company. We have also understood the data. So what kind of data we have? We have a data in terms of customer details, in terms of date, in terms of product, region and sales under the data understanding. Then after understanding the data, what we have done, we have used the data transformation step, where we have used the Power Query editor to make certain transformations in this particular data. So you can see that I'm strictly following the BI project execution model. Now that I have used the transformation, the Power Query editor to transform this data, the next step I'm working is the data model part. That is this particular part where I'm showing you how to create a data model. I've discussed about the fact and dimension tables. I've discussed about the connection, how we can establish a connection, and now I will work on the DAX part. Now let me create a DAX formula. Now there are two ways to create a DAX formula. Either you select the table and you click on new measure or any of the options over here as per your requirement, and that particular DAX formula will be created in this particular table. This is the first way. The second way, which I follow as a best practice under the best practice effort, we go to the view report. Under the view report, we have the fact table over here. We can see the same table listed over here. What you can do, we can right click on the table name and we'll get the same option like new measures, new column and new quick measure, which are available over here, except the new table option. For this you have to always select this particular icon over here. The new table option is not available over here. So what we can do, we can right click on the table name and we'll click on new measure, and let's create our first DAX formula. Now what is a measure? Now a measure is a virtual formula. A measure will never create a physical column into your data model. Just unlike the new column will always add a physical column in your existing data, the data set that you are working with. But measure is a virtual formula. It will not create any physical column in your data set. Now let's see how it does. So the first measure that I am going to calculate is a total sales. So I'll name this measure as total sales, and I'll be using a DAX formula called sum. Now sum is a very common formula, right? It's a very common formula that we use in Excel also. But what if I want to use a sum x instead of sum? Now this is a very common interview question. What is the difference between sum and sum x? It's a very common interview question that people ask, that what is the difference between sum and sum x? Now sum is a concept which performs column level calculations, addition, and sum x performs row level addition. Now let me show you how does sum and sum x work. If I type sum over here, the definition says add all the numbers in a column, which is a very common formula. Now what if I use sum x? Sum x returns the sum of an expression evaluated for each row in a table. Now let me open a notepad. Now I will be defining sum and sum x both. Now I have a number with me like 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I use sum formula, the result of this particular formula will be calculated on a column basis. Say the result will be 10. Now same thing if I do with sum x. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. If I execute this same thing, so both will give me the same result. I will get the output as same. But over here things will be calculated on the row level. For example, it will work like this: 1 plus 0 is equal to 1. Now this particular result will be added to 2. That is 2 plus 1 is equal to 3. Now this result will add it to 3. So 3 plus 3 is equals to 6. And the final result will be added to the next number. So this is how the SUMX works. So you can see that I got the result, the same result in both the cases, but the way of executing is one is at the column level and the other one is at the row level. Now let's see. So instead of using sum, I'll be using a SUMX for a change. So sum is a very common formula, you can easily explore it. Now let's use a SUMX over here. Now the requirement is I want to calculate the total sales. So I'll use a SUMX. And for calculating the total sales, I have two columns. One is the quantity column and the other one is the unit price. So I have the unit price and the quantity. Now let's perform a simple mathematical operation of multiplication where I'll be using this particular two columns to calculate the total sales. So I'll be using, now this particular SUMX formula takes two arguments. The first is table and the second is the expression. Now expression means nothing but the logic. So first define the table. So what is the table name? The table name is sales details. So I will write sales details. You can see the table name has been popped up over here in the drop down. I'll select it with the tab button and now I will write the expression. Now expression is nothing but the formula, the logic. The logic is to calculate total sales I need the unit price to be multiplied with the quantity. So I have the unit price column with me. So I will write sales details. And you can see as I write the table name, all the column associated with that particular table has been populated over here. So you can select a unit price into sales details in the quantity column. And I'll close the bracket. And I press enter. Now you can see the moment I press enter, there is a measure that has been created in my table under the sales details table, and that particular measure has an icon of a calculator. So if anyone comes to this particular data set, he can easily identify that this is a measure, a user defined measure that has been created in this table. Now let's create the next measure. Now once we have created a measure, we can test it. So before I proceed to the next DAX formula, let's test this particular measure. Now for testing this measure, what I can do, I can select a visual from my visualization pen. I'll select this card visual and I can bring the total sales into this particular field. And we can see that total sales has been 205.99 millions. Now if you want to know the exact total sales, you can format this card. You can select this particular card. You can go to the format option over here and under the data label, you can see there's an option over here called display unit, which is at auto option by default. What you can do, you can click on this particular arrow and you can select none. Now this is the actual total sales. Now this particular measure, as I said, is a virtual formula. If you come to the data view, you can see there is no extra column added to this particular table. So this is a virtual formula. it will contain the value of the calculation. Unlike the date table where we have used a add column option to create an additional column in my dataset. This will not add. Now I leave it to you, or you can share your views in the comment section, whether you as a data analyst or when you're working with the data, which is the best approach, adding a physical column to your dataset or working with virtual formulas. Now keep in mind that working with measures will never affect the performance of your report because it will never add any physical data to your data set. So the report performance, the report optimization concepts, or the you can say the report optimization process will be far more flexible in term when we are using a measure. With that, let's create a second measure. So I can go back to my report view and I'll again click on this particular table and let me select a new measure this time, and that particular measure will be total cost. So there is a cost involved in producing each product. Now that particular cost is how we can calculate. I'll name this particular measure as total cost, and I'll use a sum x. I'll use the table name, and under the expression I'll use the logic. The logic is I have the quantity and I have the unit cost with me. You can see there is a unit cost column over here. So I'll use a simple formula again where I'll multiply the quantity with the unit cost. So I'll select the unit cost into quantity I'll close the bracket and I'll press enter. Now you can see there's a second measure that I have created. Now I can bring one more card over here and I can test this measure. Now this is the unit cost, total unit cost. We can change the data label type from auto to none, and this is the total cost that has been involved in the production before the product was offered to sell to the end customers. Now that we have created a measure in our table, now I'm going to talk about a very important topic as how you have to arrange your DAX formulas in your data model. In order to arrange your DAX formulas, we'll be creating measure tables. Now measure table is a very important concept, is one of the best practices that you can follow to arrange your DAX formulas according to their priorities and according to their hierarchies. Now when I say priority and hierarchy means some of the formula may be containing the important calculations of the table. Some of the formula may contain the cumulative calculations in your table. Some of the measures will contain the time concepts in your table. Now you cannot place all the DAX formulas within one table. It will create a confusion if someone else is working on your data. There should be a signature. There should be a signature that, okay, fine, this particular report has been prepared by Mr. So and so. How? Because we can see that he has arranged this particular DAX things in a very, very organized way. And how to organize those things? By creating measure tables. Now let me first create the measure table, the first measure table, where we can keep all the important DAX formula, the measures specifically. Now I'll create 2-3 tables. The first table I'll creating will be, the name will be important measures, which will contains the total sales, the total cost, the total profit, transactions, profit margin, this kind of important formulas. The next table which I will be calculating, it will be may contain some cumulative calculations. The next table that may contain some time components. So first create a table. Now the question is how to create a major table. For that we'll be use this report view option. Under the report view, we'll go to the home section and we'll click on this particular enter data menu option over here. Now if you click on this particular option, there will be a blank table coming up in your screen. Let's name that particular table as important major. And we click on load. Now you can see, if I close the sales table, there is a table that has been created which is blank, which actually contains only one blank column, and the name of the table over here is important major. Now what I want to change the location of this particular majors, the total cost and sales, from the sales table to the important major table. How can I do that? If I select this particular major from the sales table, under the major tool option, you can see in the extreme left hand side there is an option called home table, where the home table details is updated as sales details. What I can do, I can click on this drop down, and from sales details I can select the important major table, and you can see the total cost has been shifted to important major table. Similarly, if I select the total sales major, under the major tools, the home table is sales details. If you click on this particular option, from sales details, if I select important majors, now this particular total sales has been shifted from sales details table to the important majors. What I can do now, I can right click on the blank column that was there in this table while creating, and I can delete this particular column from this table. Now I have created a new table that contains only majors, only the formulas that I am working. Now one more interesting thing that I want to show you guys, if I collapse this particular section, if I click on this particular arrow, this particular section will collapse. And if I again expand this particular section, you can see the important major table icon has been changed, and we can see the icon is changed into a major icon, a calculated major icon. Now if I click on this particular, we can see all the majors listed under this particular table. One more interesting thing is, from now onwards I can create a major under this table. We no need to use the sales table for creating the majors. I can use this particular major table to create new major, where I can easily refer all the columns from the sales details table. This will never affect any part of your reporting. Now, one more important thing that I want to show you. Now that we have created a major table and I have listed the majors under this, if I come to the model part, the model view, you can see there's a major table that has been created in a model. Now, it's important that you arrange your model also. What I can do, we have seen that I have arranged the dimension table at the top. I have kept the fact table in the bottom level. What I can do, I can bring the major table and I can create a hierarchy. I can arrange this table, keep this table over here and below the fact table. Now similarly, the number of measure tables that I am going to create will be arranged in the same way that the dimension tables are arranged at the top, just like the same way I will arrange them in the below. So in between we have the fact table, but will not establish any connection because these measure tables are not there in a model to establish a connection. These tables are there to create a group within your measures, to keep the DAX measures in different groups as per their uses and as per their priorities. So I'll be keeping this particular table as important measures where I'll be working with some more DAX formulas. With that, the next DAX formula that I'm going to work is a total profit. So I have the sales and I have the cost. The next formula that I'm going to create is a total profit. So I'll do a right click on this particular important measure. I'll select the new measure option, and this is the first time I'm going to refer a different measure within another measure. So I'll be referring the total cost measure and the total sales measure to calculate the total profit measure. So I'll name this particular measure as total profit. And I click OK, and I will use total sales minus total cost. Now you can see that I have referred two measures in this particular formula to create a third measure. Now I'll press OK, I'll press enter. And you can see that I have created a third measure, total profit. Now let me test this measure also. So I'll select one more card and I'll bring this total profit under this particular field, and I can change this particular data labels to none from auto, and this is the total profit that I have earned. Now that I have the total cost, the total sales and the total profit, why not we calculate the profit margin? Now again I will be doing a right click on this particular important measure, and I have, for calculating profit margin, we need to have the total profit and the total sales, which we have already in our data. We have already calculated these informations. So I can calculate one more measure. So I can right click on this particular option, click on new measure, and what I can do, I can name this particular option as profit margin or profit percentage, and I'll use an equal to sign, and this time I'll be using a DAX function called divide. What does it do? It's a normal divide function that we use in our day-to-day maths calculations. So I'll select this particular divide. And this divide, as we know, divide takes arguments like numerator and denominator. And the last one is an alternative result, which we can keep it to 0. Why 0? Because if the formula fails to calculate, then it will return a default value of 0. So in the numerator, I will be using the total profit. So I am again referring a measure. You can see in the denominator, I'll be using the total sales. And in the alternative result, we can keep it to 0. And if I press enter, now I've got the profit percentage. So this is how we can calculate. You can see how we have calculated 4 important measures under this table. Now what I can do, let me create a small report quickly using these measures. So I'll be using a text table, and I'll be using the customer table. I can use the customer name, and I can bring the measures in this report. So I can bring the total cost, total sales, and the total profit, and I can resize this particular table, report table, and you can see that I have created a report in terms of the customers where I can check the total cost, total sales, and the total profit. Now, why I was able to fetch the customer details? Because I was able to arrange these details in terms of customer just because of only one reason, because we have established a connection between the customer and the sales table, where when we bought the customer details from the customer details table, only the unique customer names has been extracted, because the customer detail table is a dimension table that contains only unique values. And now against those unique values, when I placed the total cost, sales, and profit measures, I got a complete clear report in terms of sales, cost, and profit as per the customers that we have in the organization. Now we can also check this same thing against product. I can remove the customer name from the report, and if I bring the product, the same values will be arranged against the product, you can see. And that is why it's important that you establish a connection between the dimension and the fact table, because while reporting, you cannot have a duplicate value in your report. That's why you use a dimension table, and that's why it's important to have a connection between the dimension and fact table. So this is how we work with the DAX concept. So that was this is where we can end. I want to end this particular session today. I'll continue working with the other DAX formulas in my tomorrow's sessions, and we'll be seeing some of the best practices that we can follow while working with DAX. And the DAX is a very interesting feature of Power BI. It's a soul of Power BI, which I term. It gives you the power to create excellent data models, and you can use those concepts in creating dynamic and interactive reports. So that was all for today, guys. So let's meet tomorrow. Don't forget to join my another session at 8 o'clock today for Tableau, where I'll be discussing about parameters and calculated columns. Again, one more option of Tableau. Just like we use DAX in Power BI, we use the concept of calculated columns in Tableau, which I'm going to discuss today in today's session at 8 o'clock. So that's all for today, guys. Stay safe and keep learning.